duration of the storms. But after the severe storms passed and the skies cleared, these facilities began their transition back to normal operations. It was vital to ensure that the unhoused people staying at these centers had a transition plan too. To meet the need, the city set up 3 evacuee transition facilities across San Jose, equipped with portable acted quickly to help residents prepare for, manage,
Remind the committee members and members of the public about our code of conduct. Includes commenting on specific agenda items during public comment and council comments and addressing the full body. Public speakers will not engage in conversation directly with the mayor or with the chair, council members. I'm reading, I shouldn't practice. With the chair, council members, board members, commissioners, etc., staff members, everybody. All members of the committee, staff, and public expected to refrain from abusive language, and failure to comply with the code of conduct, which leads to disturbance, disruption, or impeding the meeting, will result in removal from the meeting. I'm also going to, we're going to start implementing the timer just like we do at council meetings during committee meeting today. So we'll ask the clerk to put up the 10-minute timer for comments as we rotate during questioning after staff reports. So we don't need a roll call. All 5 members are present, and we will start with the first agenda item. Today's first item on the agenda is first report, D1, our citywide pavement condition update from John Risto and DOT.
Thank you, council member and committee. John Risto, Director of Transportation. I think we have a presentation. There it is. So let me just introduce the team here. Rick Scott, Deputy Director in charge of our Infrastructure Maintenance Division. Frank Farshidi, who is running the whole pavement program, and Frank will do most of the presentation, and then Ben Tron, our Senior Engineer. So we're ready to get started. If no questions? Rick?
All right, thank you, John. Good afternoon, members of the committee, members of the public. As John said, Rick Scott, Deputy Director, Infrastructure Maintenance for DOT. Today we're providing you with our annual pavement maintenance status report update. And it's pretty good news this year. So we usually start off with this presentation with a pavement condition update. For those that are new to the council, the pavement condition index is a score from 0 to 100, with 100 being a new street. And so what we have here is the overall breakdown of our miles. As you can see, the bottom row there, we have 2,500 miles of streets. In 2022, our overall PCI was a 68, being in the fair category. In 2023, that rose to 71, which brings us to the good category for the first time in a long time. You can see we've also, thanks, John. You can see we've also broken down between the major streets and the local neighborhood streets. That distinction is important because the major streets are less miles, but they carry about 85% of the traffic throughout the city. So those are like our arterials, our major roadways. Local neighborhood streets are where most of your residents live. So you can see we saw increases across both networks, both the major and the local neighborhoods, but the largest was in the local neighborhoods, and that's more streets, so it definitely did a bigger part in bringing up our overall PCI. But let me just see. There we go. Oh, crap. So sometimes averages can obscure, so it goes back. So sometimes averages can obscure kind of the data. So we break it down even further, and you look at a report card. As we can see in the major streets, it's about, we're continuing to improve our PCI with, fewer poor streets than there were last year. On the local neighborhood streets, again, you've got the percentage of streets that are in good or excellent condition is 52%. At risk or fair, 25%, and poor or fail, 23%. And in the parentheses are the changes. So as you can see, in the local neighborhood streets, both categories of at-risk or to fair and poor to failed have been improved, and that brings our overall percentage of good to excellent on the local neighborhood streets up to 52%. Again, over 50% of our streets in the local neighborhood network are in good or excellent condition, and we've always had pretty strong major streets, so 72% are in good to excellent condition there. And this next slide is a graphical representation of that. Again, this is a reflection of a lot of really strong work. Over about 60% of our streets are in the green category throughout the city, which is, coming from where Frank and I started when in 2013 vast majority were in the yellow or red. It shows the vast progress. It also shows that there's some work to do. As a reminder, we've made really significant changes, but we're still only 4 years into an 8-year plan. So we expect to see some improvements going forward as well. And for those who've been on the council before, the infamous pavement pyramid, this is a graphical representation of our program. So just the top little box there is the overall network. It shows we've got 2,500 miles of streets, PCI, as I've mentioned, of 71, and an annual ongoing need of $72.3 million. So this annual need is to keep us at a 70 or above. That's generally the industry standard for good roadways. And this backlog, $407.4 million, backlog doesn't mean that all of the roads are in bad shape. It's just the maintenance cycle we'd like to be on. So a backlog is streets that are 50 or below of PCI, or if we haven't done preventative maintenance within 8 years. We like to do preventive maintenance, which is called street sealing. So anything that is a reflection there. The $407 million is one time to do everything we want to do all at once. But that said, the story is still very positive for the entire network. I'm not going to read every single table here, but just kind of down to the local streets, I think it shows the bottom right part of the pyramid. It's still pretty clear that the vast majority of our issues are in the miles of streets in the local neighborhood network that are in poor condition, 0 to 49. It's about 357 miles still, comprising $271 million of that backlog. That said, again, as I mentioned, we are on track to maintain all of those miles by 2028, so we should still see a significant improvement here. With that, I'm going to hand it over to our division manager, Frank Farshidi.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you to members of the committee. So I'll start off with this slide with our projection of PCI, and PCI stands for Pavement Condition Index. It's an index that we track for keeping our pavement network and the condition of it. It goes from 0 to 100. The higher it is, the better the condition. So as Rick mentioned, our goal is to keep the overall network above 70, so that's in a good state of repair. So what we are showing here on this slide is just a trajectory from 2014 to just this past year, 2021. So as you can see, the good news is for the first time, we are above 70, and we are actually at 71. So after completion of our program last year. So we are definitely in that higher or, going up trajectory, as you could observe from this slide. And we anticipate also moving forward in 2024, we're going to maintain. So these are, again, projections from our pavement management system or asset management system that we get. But the other thing, a point is that we are likely to begin declining in 2027 and 28 fiscal year due to the Measure T sunset, Measure T fund sunset at that time that we have. So if we were to look at our funding sources, so the first thing on this slide, as you can see at the bottom of the slide, there are we broken them down to these different types of funds, right? So yellow, blue, red, and the gray. So overall, our pavement funds fall under these categories. So the pavement maintenance, or the city we call it city pavement maintenance funds, is the very bottom, the lowest one at the bottom, right, the orange. And state, that's combination of SB1 funds and gas tax per year. The blue is the VTA, so that's the Measure B funds and also vehicle registration fee combined. And the last portion of these columns, the gray, is the Measure T funds that we have. Those are specific to the city of San Jose. So if we were to look at all of these, right, as you can see, and we discussed in the previous slides, our required funds to maintain the current PCI right now is $75.3 million. Our annual funding is pretty close to it, so 74.4. So we're slightly below that line that we want, but we, at least for the current time being, we have the funding that we need for the network, for maintaining the network. But as I mentioned, starting in 27, 28, this is going to change as the Measure T funds come to an end. Now this slide, this we call it a cost to recovery. So this is again using that tool, the payment management tool, and projecting the backlog, as Rick mentioned, and just to kind of see how we're doing overall with the maintenance and the work that's out there, right? So back in 2018, when we used to run this with you know, a couple of those funding sources that we have now, those were not there, right? We didn't have Measure T, we didn't have VTA Measure B, even SB1 was not there. So our projection was showing $1.1 billion by 2027. But as you can see on this red trend, right, this is the current one that we have, that has significantly decreased. And even from last year when we ran the numbers, we went down from $298 million backlog in 2026 to $231 million. So this is definitely a very good story, right? So it's the work that we've been doing to the network and keeping it up to the state of good repair that's bringing this backlog down as well. But as I mentioned, you know, the increased trajectory that we are seeing, because we do this 10-year projection, as you can see, it's going back up right after 2027, and that's mainly again because of the Measure T funds that go away after 2028. So what do we have for this year? So you might ask, well, 2023, what do we have in the pipeline? But before I get into that, so just this year that we finished, we had 29 projects between the minor contracts that we're procuring and the major contracts. So we also have for this year very similar type of program. So we have combined 23 projects. As you can see, we've listed the major ones, but we already completed 5 minor contracts. This is all the prep work that we do before we get into the paving of the streets. So all the concrete, ADA curb ramp upgrades that you might see on the streets. And then we also completed 11 minor contracts on the local streets. So those are also all the prep work that we usually do. So we are pretty much very ready for starting the actual bulk of the construction, which is the paving operations, pavement rehabilitations. And we have the timeline for procurement, so going into procurement advertisement, and then we'll take these projects to the council for approval once we get a contractor on board. So total size of the program is 236 miles. We're going to touch 75 miles of major streets and 191 miles of local streets. So with the major streets, we are able to combine some other DOT improvements, including Vision Zero and quick builds and safety improvements. So with that, I'll hand it off to my colleague Ben Tran to just speak about specifically on the local and residential sides what we're doing.
Thank you, Frank. Good afternoon, the committee. For the next several slides, we're going to focus on the local street network because it is directly associated with the Measure T fund. The local street network comprised of 135 pavement maintenance zones. These zones were created to ensure that we can maximize our program delivery efficiency as well as geographic spread across the city. These are geographically contiguous zones. For your reference, you can see on the right of the slides, those are 2 typical zones that we have in the city. For the past 2 years, DOT have been considering equity priority community as a tool in our planning phase to ensure that we can provide an equitable program for our city as well as areas, underserved area in the city. Next, please. On this slide, we have a couple before and after photos from the last construction seasons. We have Bowling Green Drive and Fontaine Drive Road. The before photos represent the street that are in poor conditions that would rely on Measure T funding to fix. And the photos on the right, which are the after photos, represent the finished product that DOT aimed to deliver as part of our program. Next, please. So moving into the 2023 construction seasons for the local street, we are planning on, we're actually working on these 11 minor construction projects to upgrade and install new ADA curb ramps to meet the federal regulations before our paving operations. We have 6 major construction projects planned currently to pave 161 miles of street, utilizing a total of $36.5 million. 37.5 of those would come from Measure T, and the rest of $19 million would come from 2016 VTA Measure B. The strategy will still be focusing on the poor and failed maintenance zones to ensure that we can maximize our cost-effective treatments. One thing we want to highlight is that as of today, we have complete pavement maintenance on 649 miles of local street. And with the additional 161 miles that we are planning on paving this year, we anticipate to complete approximately 810 miles of local street, or 52% of the total local street network by the end of this year. That also means that we are on track, if not a little bit above what we expected to complete in order to finish the whole pavement maintenance of the local street network by 2028. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Frank to talk about some of our innovation within our program. Thank you.
We wanted to highlight some of the innovative work that we do in our group and our program. So besides the pavement stuff that we do on a daily basis, one thing that we started off a couple of years ago was on the concrete side, on the ADA ramp prep work that we do before the pavement projects, right? So we have a lot of ramps that we got to upgrade as we make progress every year on these projects or in our program. So on average, just to give you an idea, we do over 2,200 ramps a year. So that's a pretty significant amount of concrete that we put on our, at the corner of our streets using concrete. And as you guys know, concrete is very carbon intensive, and we wanted to see if we could lower that carbon footprint by looking into some of the tools that are ready to be implemented. We work with a local supplier in San Jose just to kind of see what specification, because we didn't want to exclude anybody, but we wanted to also come up with some formula for better capturing or lowering the carbon footprint of it. And we came up with a specification that incorporates both carbon or CO2 sequestration and also supplementing some of the cement, so replacing the cement, which is the most carbon intensive part of concrete, with supplemental cementatious material. So meaning it's fly ash and some other recycled byproducts, and still getting the same workability and same quality that we want for our curb ramps. So with that, we were able to specify a carbon reduction goal, so 40% global warming potential reduction, and we piloted the project first. It was successful. The workability and the workers and and our inspectors monitored it, and it was working fine. So we moved on, and now for this year we're changing our entire specifications. So all of our concrete products that we're going to be using is going to use this new specification. So overall, we did the projection over 10 years. We're going to reduce our carbon footprint by 7,000 metric tons of CO2 in the next 10 years. as we are upgrading these ramps. And that's equivalent to 150 cars from the road in a year. So, coming to the end of our presentation on the conclusion, so just a couple of points to point out is, for the first time, we're very proud that we are where we are at PCI of 71 overall for the city. And again, this is the third year that we are implementing or using our Measure T funds. So that has that work that we started 3 years ago definitely has made a major significant impact in our overall conditions. And our funding has improved. So again, funding-wise, we are in a good condition. And our goal is to, again, maintain all the residential streets by 2028. And we are projecting to maintain this 70 and above PCI for our network until then. And I'll close that with that. And if they have any questions, we're open for questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that report. It's a lot of good news, and we like to see the progress being made. Do we have any public comment?
There are no in-person speakers and no hands up online.
All right. Well, that brings us back to committee then. Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank the whole Pavement team for all your work and for getting that PCI up. It's great to see that climbing every year. I'm nerdy enough to be excited about that. I do have one question about communication and outreach. I know you had it in the report, but we do still have issues with residents contacting my office and just not knowing or not having clear direction about where to park, getting parking citations, and the timeline for individual construction. And as you know, with the residential streets, directly impacts people having to, get out for work or park somewhere else to make sure that they're not in the way. What ways, can you talk a little bit more about the outreach and whether how we can work with maybe neighborhood associations and the offices? I know that we don't know in any given week what streets are going to be paved in our districts, and we would be happy to help with the outreach so that we could be a little bit more, I know you guys are proactive, but getting one postcard and then work not necessarily happening on the timeline that the postcard happens. And I know this because my street got paved last summer, but it was really in the fall. So I got the postcard, I think it was maybe 6 or 8 weeks before the work actually happened. So we weren't really sure when the work was going to happen.
Yeah, thank you. That's one of the areas that we actually do improvements every year as we learn. Now we've been doing this 4 or 5 years with this significant program. But yes, we will not know, and you will not know, and the constituents won't know about the pavement schedule until you're going to approve some contracts this spring that will then, the contractors will mobilize. We will then know their schedule on all of the streets that are out there, and then we mobilize that public outreach more. So once we know the contractor's on board, they give us their schedule, and this is all through all 10 council districts, that there will be contractors working almost simultaneously. So it's really an orchestrated act to try to make sure that we know that. So we also have a pretty significant advanced information that we try to put out there, both from mailers that you might get, and then also notices that will physically go out into the neighborhoods, and then we actually hand out or put in at people's residences those notices of, I think it's a 2-week and a 72-hour notice. So we do that, and then also we have our.
So I just want to stop you, John,
Yeah.
because we didn't get those at our door.
You did not get it.
We did not get those at our door.
You're supposed to get that, and it's actually in all of the locations. So we'll check on that. So in terms of how that does, but that's part of the plan.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And I think so. You're saying there were 3 communications. I can tell you, I was expecting more. I was expecting the communication, so I was kind of looking for it, and so was my husband, because you know about the sinkhole two doors down.
Yeah.
And so we were expecting it, and neighbors were asking what's going on. And so I saw one of the three, and I was looking for it.
So we'll certainly look into that. And then the last thing I wanted to just ask for is that, yes, we actually are looking for council office assistance when we get out into those areas, because it's really important that we get it in your newsletter. You tell us where the sensitive places are that we need to have contractors be extra special. It's usually around schools and that sort of thing. So our team actually, once mobilized, we're working with your district offices and using whatever method that we need to get that back out. So in some cases, we've got to rearrange schedules around schools, or there might be something else that's happening out there. So we want to hear from you on that.
Yeah, thanks. Can I suggest that I think, we've got not just newsletters, but we do social media posts every day. I'm sure all of the council offices do that. And we also have a robust network of neighborhood associations. So when we've got the schedule at the beginning of the season, and I know very well because Stevens Creek has still not gotten paved, the schedule changes from the plan to what actually happens, and timelines shift based on weather and all kinds of other stuff. If we had a weekly update saying what streets are going to be paved the following week, that we could put on our social media calendar rotation, so that we can update folks and we can make sure the neighborhood associations know and they can put it out on Nextdoor, et cetera, that would be really helpful, so that we can put out, you're doing the physical and we could do the virtual, in addition to helping you with the physical and making sure that we've got all the language coverage we need for the specific neighborhoods, and reaching out to the PTAs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's another good idea. What we have done in the past, I'm not sure if we're doing it now. What we've been trying to do is I'll let Rick, but we've been putting it on the website. That we have that pretty interactive map about all of the streets that are getting done this summer, and then we have been adding another piece of that when we know the contractor schedule for particular streets. So I think that's somewhat beneficial, but probably better is what you were asking, is to get that directly into your office and or virtually, so that you can get it out, because there's not many people that are following all the way through on the website. So
Right.
Rick wanted to add something.
Yeah, and
Thanks.
staff does send 2-week running updates to the council offices, so it's just a matter of kind of making sure we get to the right place and get it publicized in the right way. So I think we're happy to work with all the offices to make sure it's going to the right person and that we're getting it out there. I'll also add, as Frank mentioned, 29 different projects. There's lots of different contractors. So unfortunately, sometimes that means we've got some contractors that are really great at meeting the notification guidelines, and some that are not as familiar with how we do things in San Jose. And so I think that's good feedback. We'll definitely go back to the vendor that was on that particular contract and see what happened, because those 3 notifications, that is a standard that we expect, and we do have the ability to enforce damages if that is not met. So.
Okay, thanks.
And I just want to make sure, and this is for the newer council members that haven't been through this, these are pretty significant paving operations that go into the neighborhoods. And so what we're going to be bringing to your office our 3-year update, so that you can see what we're doing, and then also get you connected with the people that you need to connect to for when we're actually literally in those neighborhoods. It's our communications people, it's the inspector and staff that Ben is managing, so that if there is an issue, you'll know who to be contacting. So you haven't been through it before, but that is something that we're going to go through with your offices.
Great suggestions, Vice Chair Davis. Getting the 2-week lookout and having ability for us to maybe post it on our own sites would be great. And I know we get questions in our office all the time. If the cones went up 3 weeks ago and the street's still not paved, it would be great for us to sort of be able to respond to that when those things happen. Okay, and I neglected earlier to welcome Councilmember Candelas as our newest member of our committee. So he's next. Go ahead, Councilmember.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. So I want to thank staff. I want to start my my comments. I think it's very serendipitous that my first meeting of Transportation Environment Committee, and the first item is something I worked directly on when I was with State Senator Jim Bell, and that's SB1. And I'm glad to see the work that we're doing as a city to make sure that our streets are paved and that folks have a safe roadway to drive on, to drive on. And so I have a quick question. So are we planning as staff, with the drop off that we're going to see with Measure T sunsetting in a few years, and obviously with more and more folks driving zero emission vehicles and the lack of funding that's going to go towards the gasoline tax, which in turn funds our road maintenance programs, are we looking or are we exploring legislatively or other to see how we're going to continue to pave our roads and have adequate street maintenance as we're doing our forward thinking?
Thank you, Council Member, for both that question and working with Senator Bell that made such a big difference with SB1. I think the entire state is really thankful that the Senator followed through on all that, and it's terrific. So yes, in Senate Bill 1, not only was it a gasoline tax increase that will be there for perpetuity, but it also added $150 for electric vehicle per year. Well, that's not enough, because actually the taxes that our average car pays is probably somewhere in the $300 or $400 range every year. So the state is aware of that, and we, along with every other city and county in the state, wants to have some solution for long term, because gasoline usage will ultimately go down. We're actually seeing it still pretty solid yet, but it definitely will be going down as more electric vehicles come on. So it is going to need to be a legislative solution, and that we've been talking collectively, not necessarily just the city of San Jose, but collectively as to what that solution can be, because it will need to be that.
Yeah.
So I don't have the answer for that. Yeah. There's no bill right now, but
right.
Yeah.
I think more so, I recognize the electric vehicle charge or fee that we tagged onto that to make sure, folks who drive electric or hybrid vehicles, pay their fair share. But I think more so the thought was, hey, we should be thinking about this so we don't have a fiscal cliff in pavement maintenance funding come 27, 28, where we start seeing the drop off in funding from gasoline taxes associated with that. Because I noticed in our chart, we had it set at a solid, what is it, 34 million. It was pretty set, but I can anticipate that dropping and lowering and growing our deferred maintenance responsibility, and that's what I wanted to make sure that our staff was cognizant of.
Go ahead. Well, before Rick goes, I think the big thing that we're actually seeing, and it was mentioned by Frank in his portion of the presentation, is Measure T runs out in about 3 years, and that's a big chunk that comes out of our pavement. So not only are we have the longer term of gasoline taxes going down probably, but we've got a big one with Measure T. So we're concerned about all that, and we're going to be trying to work on what is the answer to that.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we include that slide, because it is something we're absolutely thinking about on this side of the table for sure. What we can do is somewhat limited. We can plan for it. I think we'll be as efficient as we can be with the funding we have available, but we need the funding. And, prior, Frank and I, again, we're both here in 2013. We had grants every now and then. It's very difficult to predict a maintenance program on the occasional grant from the federal government. So we really didn't see these sustained large PCI increases until we had sustained ongoing funding from like Measure T, Measure B, all that stuff. And that allowed us to do the 3-year plan, the look ahead, all that stuff comes from ongoing and consistent funding. So I think that's why we still come here. We're going to come here every year and kind of express this. But yes, that's absolutely something we're concerned about, is the ongoing funding.
Awesome, thank you. And then lastly, with regards to outreach, yeah, ditto to what my colleague, Councilmember Davis said, is, we're here used as an asset. We all post regularly on our Instagrams, Facebooks, et cetera. I would love to be able to tell my community, hey, next week, Silver Creek Road, Aborn Road, whatever, is going to be paved. So yeah, would definitely love that. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. All right, thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Chair. I also want to thank staff for their excellent work. I'm really excited about the continued pavement and work being done. As I've been talking to residents, one of their #1 concerns in our district were the roads, the need to improve roads, and I'm sure that's been similar conversations in every district here in the city of San Jose. So I can't underemphasize just the importance of all of this. So thank you so much. When I think about construction or public works projects, I also think about opportunities for economic development, because this is an opportunity for economic development in our city. So I just wanted to ask, as we're organizing contracts for these projects, are we looking for local contractors that hire local, so that we're putting dollars into the pockets of residents here in the city of San Jose? Are these contractors, are we looking at potentially people of color owned businesses, as well as are these within the PLA here within our city?
So thanks, another really good question. And what we did over the years, is since we have a pretty robust program, very large, and that if you recall the slide that we had up, slide 9 in your packet, it actually talked about all the different contracts that we're putting out, and Frank mentioned that there's 26 this year. Most of those are actually, we actually purposely did this. We broke those down into very small packets of contracts, so that small contractors then would be the ones that would be going after it. We do have a local preference, so those local firms get a score benefit on it. So all those projects are actually, we've found very successful, and all these small contractors are able to handle those size of contracts. It's mostly those the concrete projects that Frank was mentioning, that we're building 2,000 ramps every year. So we've actually found that to be successful, and we do it every year. So there's probably, how many this year, Frank? Maybe 11 or so contracts that we're putting out. We're actually doing that.
16 total.
16. I was wrong. 16 out of the 26 are those minor contracts that go to small firms.
Wonderful.
And the larger projects are under PLA. So the PLA applies to our paving projects.
What percentage of these projects are labor companies?
They're all prevailing wage, right?
Yeah,
And
I'm not sure I understand.
do they go to the labor, are they labor union jobs? They go to the,
All of our jobs are
them
union.
Oh, wow, that's
Yeah.
great. So these are
It's a requirement.
family-sustaining wages. They have a labor union. They're getting benefits. Wow, this is excellent work. Finally, in regards to the new paved streets, do each street get an updated center line and then an edge line for these projects?
Yeah, all of the work we do will complete that street from either replacing the striping, or meaning what it was before that, or in some of the major streets where we will actually do some reconfiguration. Councilmember Foley knows all about that with Hillsdale. That was a pretty significant reconfiguration, but all the major streets will get potentially reconfiguration of bike lanes or modification straight. All of the roadways will get replaced and refreshed and new striping at the end of the job.
Well, I just want to echo my thanks, with over 50% local hire on those projects. Those dollars are going to be staying here. Those dollars are going to be reintroduced to our local economy. So I really appreciate your hard work on this. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Foley.
Thank you for the presentation. I always like to meet with your staff, John, to see what streets are on the repavement list in District 9. And I recently learned that District 9 has some of the worst conditioned streets in the city, and I attribute that to being maybe some of the older streets and that haven't been paved over time. And I want to apologize to the residents who live really close to me, because if you live on my street, you're probably not going to get repaved for a while. So just saying. Even though our condition is not very good either, but it's important to prioritize others around me and not necessarily our streets. I just want to echo what Councilmember Davis said about notification. One of the things that the city does is infrastructure, and that's paving our streets. And when we go to meetings with the Boy Scouts and we tell the Boy Scouts, these are the things we do. We do public safety, and we pave our streets and fill your potholes. They can relate to that, and they understand, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. I didn't know you did that. So when we get that report of what streets are going to be paved, and we're able to say, these are the streets and this is why, it really is informative and compelling, but we also like to tell our residents and communicate with them as much as possible what's coming. So anything you can do to give us a heads up, and I realize you're not going to be able to tell us within the exact day probably, but giving us an idea will really help us, because then we can manage expectations, particularly in those neighborhoods that have been reminding us of the condition of their streets, and we can tell them, okay, you're 2024, you're 2023, and thank you, John, for you and your team willing for us to be able to move around some of those maps and those projects. So I just want to emphasize how important it is for us to notify and to be your partner in the communication of that. When you're, I do have a question about the notification. When you're notifying the residents, is it the contractor's responsibility or the city's responsibility?
It's contractor, but we also then visit each one of those streets, and so our parking compliance folks are out there as well in advance. So it's mostly contractor that's sending the notices and putting up the A-frame boards and going out there and doing the noticing and sending the advanced postcards. But then we're out there as well in a couple days in advance trying to make sure people know to move their cars.
Okay, thank you. So if a contractor does not meet that commitment, is there something in their contract that we hold them accountable for, that part of it?
Yeah, so our inspectors monitor that very closely, and we help them, we supply them the GIS layer that has all the addresses, and we also have a QCQA where, we, in that layer that we send our office mail as well, just to make sure that we are getting those mailers as well. So just to kind of verify that, and since we do send 3 notices, like well in advance, a month in advance, 2 weeks, and then 72 hours, our inspectors definitely follow through on it too. But
Okay.
sometimes the contractors, they come up with excuses, but and especially if they're newer to we mentioned, to the city and the way we operate things. But
And if we can verify that notices didn't go out or there was some kind of mistake, we do have provisions in our contracts, something called liquidated damages, where you can charge them money or withhold payment. Typically, it's a withholding of payment until the issue's rectified. So we do have mechanisms within the contract to hold them accountable.
Rick, do we ever do that?
We have. It's been a while since
Okay.
we've done liquidated. It's hard.
But we have that opportunity.
We have that opportunity. It's hard to prove. So,
Sure.
so when we say something, that's why Frank said we mail them to ourselves if there's an address there, because
Right.
it's hard to kind of, they can say they mailed it, but the issues with mail, sometimes it's hard to prove. That's why we also do stuff in person.
Yeah.
So it's, again, we don't always.
No, I understand. Okay, but we do have that capability if there's, if someone is continuously not notifying the residents, we have a way of enforcing
Correct.
the contract with them. Okay. Well, I really appreciate this report. I appreciate that our streets are being paved, and thank you to the taxpayers for allowing us to pave our streets with your sales tax and gas tax and others. With that, I will move acceptance of the report.
Second.
All right. Well, thank you for all the comments. I have a couple questions myself. First of all, just to point out for the new folks. I mean, I think we've done a lot of good work with the equity lens, and done a lot of work, particularly on the east side, at getting roads paved, and that's now why we're seeing the map showing a lot more of the work that needs to be done actually in districts 1, 9, and 10. So I was kind of surprised by the colors on that map, but I know that you're focused now on getting a lot of those red areas taken care of. And I'm sure we can all come up with neighborhoods in our own districts that are behind and need attention. I'm very appreciative that Alviso will get paved this year. It's been a long time coming for Alviso. They really need those roads paved. When I was the age of the Boy Scouts that Councilmember Foley was talking about, I used to joke with my family about how every time they repaved the roads got taller a little bit, and that eventually the roads would be above the houses that they're passing by. I guess I know that in the major repaving, you're scraping and replacing. You're not getting higher. When we do sealing, though, we have to scrape the edges and seal in the middle, right? Because you're not
Yeah,
fully-
for the ceiling, we don't do any milling or milling operations where we take off the old material, so we just seal it on top, and it's like less than 0.25 inches in thickness. So it's really minimum in terms of adding, like you mentioned, to the profile of the street. But on our resurfacing stuff, resurfacing work that we do, we don't add anything. We always either take off like 2 inches and put back 2 inches, or we're recycling the material in place and then taking extra material off, and so that way we're not adding more to the profile.
Great, thanks. I appreciate all the work you're doing towards sustainable paving and trying to minimize carbon. Can you just talk a little bit about what it means when you talk about how you're sequestering carbon into the concrete ramps? Exactly how that works.
So yeah, so this formula that we have the specification that we have come up with is pretty general. So it allows the supplier to meet that goal, which is 40% reduction in carbon, by either having supplemental cementitious material, or they call it CO2 sequestering, where the concrete producers they bring carbon or CO2 from other industries, right? And then they inject it into the concrete, and it mineralizes into a hard, product. And it just that way, you are capturing that carbon indefinitely inside your sidewalk or ADA that we just built. So that's how, and it's a chemistry formula, and it's
it's great. It's good to be part of the solution, and you're showing that it doesn't cost any more to do the right thing. So
no,
appreciate that. Yeah. The decline you're showing happening in the quality after 27-28, you said it was due to the sunset of Measure T, but in reality, it's due to the fact that the first series of roads that were started in the cycle will now be 10 years out and will start to deteriorate. So, and in fact, I see roads like Morrell Avenue. I was just driving down the other day and saying, wow, this road's in bad shape. Oh my gosh, it's already been repaved, right? I mean, we're already at that point where some of the roads that have been repaved are beginning to deteriorate again. Ideally, would we have a 10-year cycle where we'd basically finish all the roads and then do this whole thing again and just be doing it constantly over a 10-year cycle?
I think ideally the huge outlay we're seeing for Measure T would get us back to where the streets are resurfaced, and then you get on a preventive maintenance cycle where you do things like sealing to keep those streets in relatively good shape. Like if you're creating a maintenance program from scratch, that's the goal. Again, that was never going to be where we were going to get. So I think it's kind of as close to that as we can get. That's our goal.
Okay.
And so you're right. That's why when I mentioned the backlog, the calculation into the backlog is PCI under 50, or streets they could be an 80, but if we haven't touched them in 8 years, the sealing cost gets into that backlog calculation, because we want to be able to do preventive maintenance every 8 to 10 years.
So if we put that slide back up for page 7, that shows the annual funding, I was just a little confused by the line that says the annual level was, I think the goal was 75 million, and it says annual level 74 million.
So the solid line was the funding that we do have projected out, and that's really kind of manipulated by the higher funding we have until 27-28 with Measure T. And then the dotted line is the line needed to keep it at 71, which is where we are today.
But that solid line, that's projected of what will happen after Measure T sunsets, or that's
the solid line is the 10-year average that accounts for the high years leading up to 27-28, and then after Measure T goes away, it's still, because of all those years where the number is higher than 74.4, the 10-year average is 74.
So it's an average. It's not telling us that we still have a gap to get to 74 starting in 27-28.
We will have a gap. We're just doing so much work now, like kind of I mentioned that desired maintenance cycle. Sealing is 5 times cheaper than resurfacing. So theoretically, if you were to resurface every single street and then you get on a sealing cycle after that, your cost will go down because you don't have to resurface every street.
But you'd want to be at 75 million to do that ongoing resealing cycle.
We'd want to be at 75.3 to maintain a 71.
So at the point at which Measure T expires, would we be considering some kind of funding mechanism that will fill the gap, or are we?
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah, that was a question that Councilmember.
yeah, I know,
Pinellas
I
asked.
kind of asked that already. I'm just,
We don't have that in place, nor do we have a plan for it, but yes, we're trying to raise that as a major issue because we're within a handful of years away from
Right.
that, so.
okay. And I guess just to see what a real analysis is of how much we need, because we were so far behind, we had to overshoot in the last bond. But presumably, we don't need as much funding going forward if we time it right and keep the cycle going. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that is a fair statement because I think when, if I recall correctly, our annual need used to be something like 112 million or something like that. So it's gone down about 30 million or so because we've been on this cycle. There will always be some residual amount needed to have a good maintenance cycle, but it used to be a lot more when our streets were in worse condition.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second, so let's move to vote.
Candelas,
Aye.
Ortiz,
Aye.
Foley,
Aye.
Davis.
Yes.
And Cohen.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. The item passes 5-0. We're moving on to our treatment plant advisory, or treatment plant maintenance and capital work update. Carrie and your team. Or Carrie, I guess your team. Okay. We start with David. You're going to kick us off? Okay, great.
Hi, good afternoon. Mariana Chavez, Deputy Director for the RWF. We're going to have a presentation. Today, David Olson, our Division Manager, will make the presentation, and Matt Nguyen, our Deputy Director for Public Works, is here as well. So we will be responding to questions at the end.
All right, good afternoon. I'm presenting the annual status report for the RWF CIP for January to December 2022. There we go, okay. So as a quick reminder, the CIP is based on the plant master plan that was adopted by San Jose and Santa Clara in late 2013, which recommended more than 100 capital projects to rehabilitate and modernize the RWF. In early 2014, staff completed a validation process that prioritized the projects and formed the basis of the current CIP and funding strategy, which was approved by TPAC and Council. We are the largest capital program in the city, and we are in the 8th year of a 10-year program valued at $1.4 billion. Through the end of December, we had committed over $800 million for the planning, design, construction, and critical rehabilitation projects at the facility. Next slide. During this reporting period, we made significant. During this reporting period, we made significant progress in the program in key program areas. Related to the biosolids management strategy, the city received 5 proposals for transportation and beneficial use services in early March 2022 in response to requests for proposals that have been advertised in November 2021. The scope and services included coordinating with RWF staff to schedule the delivery of containers for the loading of dewatered biosolids, as well as transporting those dewatered biosolids to beneficial use sites and preparing reports for billing and regulatory purposes. Staff negotiated these with the 3 highest ranked firms with a focus on each company's approach to managing the dewatered biosolids, the available capacity of the proposed beneficial use sites, and the commercial terms of the agreements in coordination with the City Attorney's Office. In December 2022, Council approved the agreements with Denali Water Solutions, Synagro West, and Listech International Limited to manage approximately 35%, 57%, and 8%, respectively, of the RWF's dewatered biosolids. The approved agreements will provide reliability, secure capacity, and set competitive rates in advance of the new dewatering facility's operation, which is expected in late 2025. The agreements also provide flexibility as they have options to extend the term beyond June 2029, which should allow staff, if they need more time, to implement the longer-term aspects of the biosolids management strategy, namely the development of an on-site partner facility. During this period, staff also made progress on the approach to upgrading the RWF's existing aeration tanks, considering the significant change in regulation anticipated for the upcoming 2024 nutrient watershed permit. This permit is expected to impose limits on total and inorganic nitrogen for all dischargers to the San Francisco Bay, that with a compliance likely required by 2029. The recent algal bloom incident in North Bay in the summer of 2022 has heightened concern about the impact of nutrient discharge to the bay and has resulted in increased scrutiny and discussion on both the anticipated load caps and the timing of implementation. The CIP process optimization study completed in late 2021 identified the process change known as modified step feed biological nutrient removal with simultaneous nitrification denitrification, also known as S&D, and a carbon, along with a hydrocyclone-based activated sludge wasting technology known as indents, and a carbon addition, which will ultimately provide compliance with the expected future regulations, as well as future flows and loads. The study also recommended that these changes be introduced incrementally to adequately meet the needs of the RWF in a cost-effective manner. The project will also prioritize structural rehabilitation of the tanks. Next slide. During this reporting period, we had 25 active projects. This chart shows 22 of those are being delivered using the design build delivery method. The projects highlighted in green are those that advanced the stage in our project delivery model during the reporting period. Our other 3 projects are being delivered using the progressive design build approach. Next slide. During this period, we had 6 projects in feasibility development. The yard piping improvements project, phase 3 project, was initiated last April, and as condition assessment work has been ongoing. Staff also initiated the additional digesters facilities upgrade project and has been preparing procurement documents for an owner's advisor services. Staff finalized the scope for the final effluent pump station project, which will build flood walls along the outfall channel, replace the existing outfall bridge, and make improvements to the outfall pump station. During this period, we also finished the scope for the plant-wide security system upgrade project, which will add camera monitoring stations, install card readers at building entrances, and upgrade the camera system throughout the RWF. Next slide. We had 5 projects in design or bid during this period. The project teams for flood protection and main guard shack replacement completed conceptual design for the respective projects. The city opened bids for yard piping improvements phase 2 in November, and we anticipate bringing a recommendation to award the construction contract in April. The facility-wide water system improvements project completed their design, and we anticipate bidding that construction contract later this month. Next slide. Finally, we have 9 projects in construction, ranging in value between $3 million and $131 million. Next slide. This map shows the project sites at the facility. As you can see, we have a number that overlap, which requires city staff to coordinate construction activities very carefully to prevent impacts to schedules and costs. Due to the limitations in time, I'll be highlighting just 2 of our projects in this presentation. Next slide. The first project I'd like to highlight is the Headworks project. Construction started in the summer of 2020, and it's approximately 91% complete. I don't know if we're going to be able to show the video here. Oh, okay. So, yeah. So we had a video that essentially is showing a drone flyover of our new Headworks facility. It included showing the grit classifiers, grit tanks, as well as the new raw sewage pumps, odor control system, and screening facilities.
Can we just check if maybe you can start the video from there? It's a PDF
Okay.
file. Okay, so.
So we'll have to use your imagination. We apologize for that. What we were going to be showing, the flyover there was also going to be showing the testing that we were doing in December of last year, which was essentially using recycled water, about 50 to 100 million gallons a day, to test all the new equipment there in our new emergency overflow basin. That new basin has also been entirely paved, which will improve maintenance. It also includes a new storm drain system to ensure that the discharge onto any of the pavement area goes back to the Headworks. This slide shows photos. They are giving you a perspective on the left-hand side of the new raw sewage vertical turbine solids handling pumps. They're about 40 feet tall without motors on them. We had to use 2 cranes to take them off of the trucks and put them into the wet wells. The photo on the right is showing the construction of the Milpitas structure, which was found to have significant concrete damage due to high levels of hydrogen sulfide. A new addition to the structure was required to redirect flows to allow repairs. This involved rerouting both interceptors from the city of Milpitas for several months so that work could be performed. The next slide. The second project I'd like to highlight is the filter rehabilitation project. Construction began in fall of 2020, and it's approximately 50% complete. Next slide. This is showing a 260-ton crane that is helping us replace the media, essentially the gravel into the filters. The gravel is actually in those white bags on the ground there, and so they're actually lifting them up, putting them in, taking out the old gravel. The serpentine tanks to the right-hand side is where the chlorine is added during the process, and this is actually the final step in our wastewater treatment before being discharged to the outfall channel. Next slide. This collection of photos is showing the various aspects of the repairs that we're doing to the filter complex. The picture on the left is showing the replacement of the filter media, which consists of gravel, silica sand, as well as anthracite coal, which is being vacuumed out and later disposed of. The picture in the upper center is showing contractors in full protective gear demolishing the surface wash line, which contained lead paint. The picture on the upper right is showing the new switchgear, electrical switchgear, being placed on a concrete pad, which is above a duct bank. And the photo on the bottom is showing our new blowers for our air scour system. And final slide. This is showing our look ahead for this year. Activities through the end of December. We anticipate this year completing or reaching substantial completion for 6 of our projects, including the Headworks project. We anticipate advertising the construction contracts for the yard piping phase 2 project, as well as the facility-wide water project. Facility-wide water, HVAC improvements, and new Headworks access road projects. And we also expect to come back to council to award the facility-wide water and yard piping projects. And with that, that concludes our presentation, and we're available to answer any questions you may have.
All right, well, thank you. It's amazing work. I love seeing it. I'm sorry we couldn't watch the videos. Those of us on TPAC have seen them, and it's usually the highlight. So we'll get it.
You're going to get it again at TPAC. So
yeah,
for
so we'll
you
see it
that
soon,
are there, we'll show the video.
We'll try to get it out to everybody else to take a look, too, because it's pretty impressive. I'm certainly proud of the work at our regional wastewater facility. It's doing the upgrades, all these really, really major upgrades, while keeping the largest plant in the West United States operating at the same time is actually quite good work. And the engineering is amazing. The management and workforce that are doing it under tough conditions are doing a great job. So I want to thank you for that. And I also like the image of the new entrance. It's an entrance befitting the grand facility that we have. So let's go to public comment if there are any. I don't see any, but can you confirm?
Yeah, there's no comments.
All right. Any questions, comments from the? All right. Councilmember Candelas.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, staff, for the presentation. I appreciate, and I'm sure all of us appreciate, a well-functioning wastewater facility because our residents aren't calling us, and we don't have any backup flow. So thank you for that. This is major work where we're investing more than $1 billion on making sure that our facility is up to par to the region. I got a question. Do we have a local hiring or incentive policy for procurement, considering this is a regional wastewater facility and not just a San Jose one?
We do have a local component, and that means the county of Santa Clara. So when we evaluate proposals, there is a component that we always do there for local business as part of the evaluation.
So it's like a percentage.
It's usually like 5% of the proposal is for the local
what is considered a local business.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Yeah, I wanted to keep that in mind. I know my council colleague mentioned it earlier, but I mean, if we're investing so much money, I think it's important that we keep those jobs here and not ship to another state, another region, so we keep the local economy going, considering these are San Jose funds being expended or regional funds being expended. So I would hope we have a policy in place and or encourage local hiring for these major organizations. Thank you. That's my comment.
All right. Is there a motion? Oh, you have a comment? Okay, Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Councilmember Candelas. Just one follow-up. It just made me think, do we have any percentages, like how many of our contractors or procured service providers are local?
We have done a little bit of evaluation. Just let me talk a little bit about the type of contracts that we have.
Yeah.
We usually have, compared to other contracts from DOT or other parts of the city, our contracts are pretty significant. So they could go from 30 to like 150 million. Because of the nature of the contracts also, we pre-qualify our contractors. So the general contractors are usually larger contractors. However, in any given project, they could have anywhere between 5 and 25 subcontractors. And a lot of the time, those smaller contracts that are the subcontractors go to local businesses. So we did an evaluation in one of our larger projects, and we found at least 5 of the companies working in the large projects were usually within the regional, like the county jurisdiction. Some of them local, San Jose, some of them in the area. But again, I mean, it's difficult to tell because every contract is different and we have different people participating. But there is usually like, the contracts are so big that it's usually like a significant portion that end up being like a local company.
Okay, that makes sense. And you know, this is my second T&E meeting, so I've given that these major contractors may subcontract, our worker standards, you know, those sort of like livable pay wage policies, those still double down into the subcontractors,
yes,
right?
so all our projects, since we signed the PLA agreements, are under that agreement. As part of the requirements, our OEA office gets to audit. They get copies of all the payrolls, all that. So prevailing wages are paid. All requirements are met.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Move to accept the report.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
Candelas.
Aye.
Ortiz.
Aye.
Foley.
Aye.
Davis.
Yes.
And Cohen.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for the annual report. Look forward to seeing you at TPAC next month. All right, we're on to item number 3, which is our initiatives roadmap update on the sustainable city infrastructure. And Kip, you're going to give us this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to start us out. Kip Harkness, Deputy City Manager. With me, we'll also be presenting Erica Garafo, the lead resilient strategist, as well as we'll have a team of folks to give you a little bit of a postcard of what's going on. So if we could go ahead and put the presentation up. So I'm just going to back up a little bit to set the context, since we do have kind of a new committee here, and some of you have heard this before, and Erica will be working the clicker for me since I'm clickerless. This enterprise priority is one of the ones that how we deal with the existential threat of climate change. As you can see in these two graphs, there's a high correlation between the carbon that we've been putting into the air and the heat and the increase in global temperatures that we see. Obviously, correlation is not causality, but we have a lot more data than just these two graphs to demonstrate the man-made effects of carbon in the atmosphere and the resulting climate change. So a lot of the work that we do now is focused both on climate mitigation, which is our obligation as citizens of the world, and on climate adaptation, which is our obligation as citizens of San Jose. So one way of thinking about that is I'm fond of Kate Raworth's work around what's called donut economics, and I think it provides a useful way to think about this. as a starting point, we have the planet, and as I like to say, last time I checked, we only have the one. And so what we do know is that with the planet, we are overshooting the resources of the planet in about 12 different significant ways. I've highlighted 3 of them here, which are most applicable to our local government: land conservation, freshwater withdrawals, and climate change. That is a very, very wicked and difficult set of problems to solve, which will require global coordination. But largely, it's about reducing our usage and the amount of carbon that we put into the atmosphere. In addition to the planet, though, we also care about people. And with people, we have almost the exact opposite direction of problems. There are shortfalls around the things that people deserve and need: social equity, water, housing, clean energy. And this is also a complex set of problems. The most straightforward way to deal with these is to produce more of all of these things so that people can have them. So there's a natural tension between the desire to reduce production that's necessary to deal with some of the climate change issues and the desire to increase production to deal with some of the equity issues around people. So we don't have the luxury of solving one or the other. We have to solve both because we care about people and we care about the planet on which they live. And so the challenge, as Kate Raworth puts it out, is to work in that donut in the middle and to create a safe, just space for humanity where we are both dealing with the limitations of the planet and the equity needs of our people. So how does this translate into the real world of our work? We think it's useful to ask and answer 4 questions around our work. First of all, the 2 questions raised by the donut economics. What's important for the planet? What's important for people? In addition, 2 additional questions. What's actually core to what the city of San Jose can and should be doing? And what's potentially transformative at scale if we do it, or has a high return on investment if we do it at scale? And that sweet spot in the middle is where we want to focus the vast majority of our work because it's where we can have the most benefit. So as we've talked about this and worked with this as a council and as a team, we've come up with 5 streams of work and 5 objectives around this, and below them, I think 18 different work streams that contribute up to that larger piece. And so the top 5 are this notion of being disaster ready and climate smart, infrastructure resilient, clean energy resilience in particular, water resilience, and natural environment restoration. At this point, I'll turn it over to my counterpart, Erica Garofo, to walk us through a deep dive into a little bit more of this.
Good afternoon, Erica Garofo, Lead Resilience Strategist. So as Kip mentioned, we have about 18 work streams that we're tracking. And each quarter, we ask our workstream drivers to commit to 1 or more deliverables that they plan to accomplish each quarter. And we call these key results. So at the end of the quarter, we score ourselves on whether or not we accomplished what we said we were going to accomplish. And you can see that there in the color-coded. Green for completed, yellow is majority complete, but not quite everything. Red is kind of missed the mark on that one. And so this slide in front of you shows the key results and our score for our quarter 2, which is the October through December 2023 period. Overall, we completed work in 11 of our work streams. 5 work streams, we completed some, but not all of our key results. And we had 1 key result, understanding sea level rise, that was red. And in this last one, I think the lesson learned here is that we need to take a step back and kind of reevaluate what the city's role is in that particular work stream. So I'm not going to go through all of these, and I want to apologize for the super tiny font. They are detailed in the attached memo, so you can read more about them there. We also have the key results for our current quarter are also in the memo. So as I said, I'm not going to go through each of these today, but I did want to highlight 3 of the work streams. So first, we have Ray Reardon is going to take us through preparing the city for the next disaster. He's going to play a video that hopefully works as a video to highlight the city's response in the recent January flood events. Secondly, Carol Boland will illuminate our work on deploying microgrids for resilience. And lastly, Carrie Romanow will dive into creating new water supply opportunities. Okay, and I will turn it over to Ray.
Good afternoon, Ray Reardon, Director of the Office of Emergency Management. And during the storm response that we had in January, from December through January, we did take pictures, snippets of actions that are going on, and the great response that we had in coordination with the Valley Water Agency, as well as with the county and the collaboration to make sure we had a robust response. So we'll just play this clip.
In San Jose, the safety and well-being of all residents is our top priority. When our community experienced powerful atmospheric river storms this winter, our dedicated city staff and community partners acted quickly to help residents prepare for, manage, and recover from the storms. A critical part of the city's storm response was providing protection to our most vulnerable residents. The City of San Jose, in partnership with the American Red Cross, set up 2 24-hour emergency evacuation centers for unhoused residents that had been living near creeks and waterways. The centers stayed open for the duration of the storms, but after the severe storms passed and the skies cleared, these facilities began their transition back to normal operations. It was vital to ensure that the unhoused people staying at these centers had a transition plan too. To meet the need, the city set up 3 evacuee transition facilities across San Jose. Equipped with portable toilets, hand washing stations, and personal care kits, these facilities serve as a safe place for unhoused residents to stay, following the closure of the emergency evacuation centers.
Teams from several city departments and our nonprofit partner Home First helped transfer 126 evacuees from emergency evacuation centers to here our evacuee transition facilities in order to provide them a more safe and secure environment as they transition to more stable housing.
I actually was homeless, staying in the street, and I moved to the Camden Community Shelter for the Red Cross, and then from there, the city came and just made an announcement, that they were gonna have this for us, and I was like, okay, so we kind of transitioned to the Camden community to here, to the tiny homes, and it was great.
When I got here, I realized that I was gonna be able to have the opportunity to have a tent, free laundry, washer and dryer, and free showers, food, and resources to be able to get to and from my job, which took the edge off of everything. It's made it so much easier for me to handle what I had to handle. I actually got a job. I was ecstatic. I was so happy because I felt like at that point, I was gonna have to go back to the creek. But when I found out I didn't have to go back to the creek, I was like, okay, cool. Thank goodness. I was so happy.
Home First is providing the services and the support at our evacuee transition facilities. They're staffing them 24 hours a day with a full range of support services, from case managers to clinicians to employment assistants, all with the goal of helping participants move into stable housing.
My goal is to have a place, get my own apartment or my own studio, doesn't matter. As long as we have a roof,
I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I know that the people that I know that are homeless, that are actually going the distance to try to actually help themselves, should something like this have been available for them in the past, especially in certain locations, it would definitely make a big difference. Some people have no choice or feel like they don't have a choice. It's when they have a choice that they are able to make that decision. And that's what these people did for us. They provided us a choice. And I'm glad I made the choice.
Creating the evacuee transition facilities was truly a collaborative effort. We couldn't have done it without our partners here at Home First, who are providing the care and support to our evacuees. And of course, our partners at the San Jose Conservation Corps, who helped in the setup. But we also couldn't have done it without so many city employees and departments who assisted in the effort. It was, again, truly a collaborative effort, and we're so grateful to each and every person who helped.
The report also highlights completion of many tasks in the emergency management realm of activities, from workshops of updating our plans taking a look at our response to COVID, our previous emergency, which we haven't forgotten, and obtained feedback on our upgoing multi-year training and exercise plan, and conducting CERT programs and community emergency response team programs in multiple languages. We completed one in Spanish and one in Vietnamese last quarter, and we're conducting them now, and I hope to obtain or complete a Chinese version by the end of this quarter as well. We also are making sure that we're reaching out and completing the construction of our new Emergency Operations Center, which is looking quite nice now.
Okay, thank you, Ray. And to Carol.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Carol Bullen-Wadham, your new program manager of microgrids. My position is brand new. I'm the first person to hold it, and it was created by our former Mayor Liccardo's administration in response to creating sustainable solutions for power outages, both planned and unplanned, that affect our community in increasing frequency. I myself have been a city employee for over 13 years. I was lucky enough to start out in ESD. I've most recently managed sustainability compliance programs for ESD, and I'm now very honored to join Walter Lynn and the Public Works team to bring sustainable grid infrastructure to San Jose in the form of microgrids. What are microgrids, you might be asking? Well, at their most basic, a microgrid is a solar system with battery storage. And that battery component allows the system to be independent from the grid, which makes them critically needed infrastructure, both for emergency preparedness, but also for subsidizing daily energy needs in the future with carbon neutral solutions. So basically for providing carbon neutral electricity. In 2019, the Public Works Department scoped 40 different city facilities for feasibility of microgrid installation, ranking them on considerations of equity, day-to-day facility functioning, and their critical needs for emergency preparedness. Happy Hollow Zoo, pictured here, and Roosevelt Community Center are the top 2 ranking sites and the first 2 that we plan to build. To fund them, we've submitted a $3.5 million general fund request to the Budget Office for fiscal year 23-24. And while we're working with the Budget Office on this request, we're not relying on it solely, and we are seeking outside funding opportunities as they're available. This last September, we applied for a California Resilience Challenge grant, but we were notified in early December that we were not selected due to limited funding, many applicants, and at that time, our construction plans were still in early planning stages. But now, our top 2 sites are close to shovel-ready, and we're pursuing several new upcoming grant opportunities, both at the federal and state level, to subsidize their implementation construction costs. Such as this spring, we're looking at the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant, or EECBG, and the Building Upgrade Prize, which are both federal opportunities. This fall, we're hoping to go for the Building Resilience Infrastructure and Communities, or BRIC grants, through FEMA, and the Community Resiliency Centers program opportunity through the California Strategic Growth Council. We're also working closely with CMO's Intergovernmental Relations Group, who have been advocating for us at the state and federal legislative levels and helping us to secure earmarks with the federal infrastructure bill. With their help, we're starting to catch the ears of our federal and state folks, and with my team established now, I expect that we'll see outside funds coming in soon. So I look forward to bringing you more news of microgrid progress as our program grows. So if there are any questions today, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. And last, we'll turn to Carrie.
Good afternoon. You know, it's sort of funny to be talking about water supply when there was hail this weekend, and quite a bit more rain than we expected when we first embarked on looking at water supply for the city. But you know, most of us know that's not going to last forever, right? So we'll be back in drought mode most likely at some point in the coming years. And so the idea around this particular focus area is to prepare for that. So working with our partners, whether that's the SFPUC or Valley Water, looking to say how much drinking, potable water to supply to San Jose need, and then how much non-potable could we use for outdoor and non-drinking purposes. And so we're really in the beginning stages of this, where we'll look in the next year to kind of broadly assess the supply options, but also where could we sort of dampen that demand need as well. And so we've signed some letters of intent with Valley Water to, again, look at expanding our use of wastewater effluent. And then we're working with San Jose Water to expand Purple Pipe, the South Bay water recycling, and then working with SFPUC on some other purification and potential brackish water ideas. So now we're kind of throwing a broad net out there, looking at the numbers, seeing financially what makes sense, and then preparing to build these projects. As you saw in the RWF CIP program, these types of infrastructure projects aren't built in a year. So, if we start planning now, we'll probably see the projects in the next 8 to 10 years. So sort of setting that ground level and then really making sure we're supporting our partners so that our own city has enough water supply. So that's our report, and a lot more to come. Thanks.
Thank you, Carrie, and I will turn it back over to Kip.
Just a appreciation to the teams on this, and I think you see with the addition of a single staffer like somebody like Carol, how much headway we're able to start to make strategically thinking about this. And just to dig into one possible opportunity, the BRIC grant that she mentioned, we think with her work, both on strategy and implementation, we're going to be highly competitive for that. But that does require us to complete a local hazard mitigation plan in collaboration with the county, which Ray has been working to make sure that that happens before the deadline, and for our building department to undergo a BSEGS evaluation of their ability to do the work, which is going to require us working with a consultant over several months to do the necessary pre-work. So this is all complicated work that takes time, but I think one of the bottom line lessons learned for me is we can get a really far along on these when we have a full-time person who is thinking about this and working on this and has the support of senior leadership. So with that as sort of 3 postcards from resiliency, we turn it over to any questions, comment, or feedback that you might have for us and the team.
All right, thank you, team. I don't see any comments, but I'll confirm if there are any public comments.
No public comments.
All right, we'll come back to committee. Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much, staff, for writing such a clear and concise memo. I also appreciate the drivers that are pushing each of these work streams and ensuring we are making progress on our city's initiatives. So just want to make sure that I thank you all. I understand that there are 3 positions created from the 2022-2023 adopted budget that are time-limited positions that end in 2 years. However, we still have 1 vacancy, I believe, for a principal engineer in the Environmental Services Department to investigate recycled water projects. Is there any update on how recruitment has been going for this position since 1 year is left for the role?
Thank you. We've not had successful recruitments. Finding talent in the water and wastewater industries is very tricky right now, and we still don't have any viable candidates. We're relooking at our recruiting strategy and seeing how we might engage the right person. For these types of jobs, we don't want to underfill it with someone that's not ready to develop a $500 million project. But at the same time, we know there might be some compromises that we can make by leveraging Fuse Fellows a little bit more, et cetera. But to directly answer the question, we don't have a candidate.
Okay. Thank you for that answer, and I understand the difficulty around that. While we're on the topic of recycled water, is there anything in the works to plan to expand upon our recycled water piping, especially in areas like East San Jose, which has little to no piping?
Yes, thank you for asking. In 2014, we did a South Bay Water Recycling Master Plan in collaboration with Valley Water. In that plan, there are specific extensions that are already mapped out and ready to go. And so we've been working with San Jose Water Company to build those into their rate case, because as they're regulated by the CPUC, they kind of need approval to make that capital investment. We've asked them to expand more rapidly, and they're very much game for that. So ideally, in the long term, we'd like to have all the parks and schools and golf courses, sort of all those big outdoor users, online or pretty close to where they could tap in. But San Jose Water's committed to expanding more, and then our own muni water system, which is already highly leveraged in Purple Pipe, is going to continue to expand as well. And so will Milpitas and Santa Clara.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's definitely an interest and priority for my office, so I appreciate that update. I see that that in preparation for the next city disaster from October to December, there was an implementation of community emergency response teams in other languages. And language access is essential for my district, since the majority of our residents speak either Spanish or Vietnamese. Are there plans to bring more CERT programs in other languages for this quarter?
Yes, last quarter we did a Spanish and a Vietnamese course. We're doing another series this quarter. We're working on a Chinese course as well.
Oh, wonderful. And is that going to be a continuation? We'll continue to provide courses in other languages?
Yeah, our goal is to get instructors, to encourage members who get interested enough to also become instructors in those native languages. That's the goal.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Talking more in depth about language access for our programs, is part of your updating your EV education material also including them in Spanish and Vietnamese?
So the question was about EVs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see if we have someone from Community Energy here.
Oh, it's another one.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And then regarding the downtown large project electrification, is there any update on when you will bring the municipal codes to become a municipal provider to the council?
Zach, can you help us out with that on the Muni code changes? Asking Zach Strike, Assistant Director of Community Energy, to help us with that question.
Good afternoon. Yes, later this year, subject to, we have a number of changes to that we are recommending in late April or early May. That counts the date still to be determined. As far as a municipal utility formation, Kip, I think you may know better than I, but I think perhaps before the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, I think the intent is to bring that back before the end of the fiscal year for council conversation and consideration.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for answering all my questions. Thank you for meeting with my staff, fielding their questions as well. I know that our office is really excited about this work, so please do not hesitate to reach out to us and explore ways in which we could help with outreach or anything like that. So thank you.
You want to move acceptance to the report?
Yes, move to accept the item.
Second.
All right, thanks. Thank you for the report. I don't think any other hands up, so I'll ask a few questions. So this month, this is a large work plan, a lot of different areas, and I know this month you highlighted 3 of them. And this is a quarterly report, so will we see, in each quarter we'll see a different set of 3 so we can get some insight into what's going on in those other areas?
Yes, unless you'd like it a different way. We're open to guidance and suggestion.
I just want to confirm.
Yeah, our thought is to sort of...
Maybe that's my request, is that we have 12 of these then opportunities during a course of a year over 4 quarters. So.
Yeah, and it might be a little bit more than 3 if we think we've got some topical stuff, but the thing is to bring stuff back that's both topical and also a useful point of feedback for you. So the idea is we'll have these kind of postcards every quarter that we come back.
Great. And, I want this committee to become a place for us to sort of talk about what our vision should be as a city. It's great to get the reports, but we also ought to be thinking about what input we want to have as a council into the direction going forward. We're talking about sea level rise, for example, where maybe we're unclear, but we should have a conversation maybe about it here in some format. Maybe we can talk about how that can take place. And I know that you talked about it's not clear whose jurisdiction it is. It's true. There's a lot of different bigger questions than what we do as a city. Alviso shoreline will be a key battlefront in that fight against sea level rise. There was a great article, if you didn't see it, in October in the LA Times about the salt pond wetland restoration and how important that will be to protect the land south of the bay from the bay and be a great sink for water and as sea level rise. And so they're starting that process with the first levee project there, and they'll have to continue to do the other 4 miles, hopefully. But we should be fully engaged in that and making sure that progress continues, even though it's probably bigger scope than what we'll be doing as a city.
Agreed. And if there are particular items like that we kind of want to bring to this committee, I think we've deliberately scoped this as a broad agenda that we can bring things in. And if it requires a more focused agenda, we can amend the agenda on the work plan fairly easily to add those items in, so that we're not in violation of any policies. But that's exactly the type of thing I would hope we would be able to discuss in depth. And just on that, and a good credit to Zane Barnes, who's here, the intergovernmental relations folks, and our partner Valley Water, we're able to successfully secure for the first time ever some funding for reaches 4 and 5 of that levee project, which, as anybody who with common sense would know, doing 3 reaches of a levee doesn't really help you that much. So 4 and 5 are vital, and we have an anticipated $91.2 million coming because of our joint advocacy on that, which is a start and a good reason to begin to discuss this project together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, our first step is to make sure that the sea level rise is pushed away from San Jose and into Sunnyvale. But obviously, the goal is not to have that happen, but to fortify the entire coastline. On emergency preparedness, we talk a lot about sea level rise and flooding and the rainstorms. Are we also having a work stream around fortifying the hills against fire and some of the things that we need to do around Allen Rock Park and some of the other areas to prevent fire incursion?
Yes, and there's been a lot of work with the Conservation Corps helping mitigate some of the fire risks in those hills. So we have been doing that operation.
And specifically, the work around wildfire planning and wildfire evacuation is on the work plan and on the list. And Chief Sapien has been taking a big leadership role in helping to coordinate that across the various city departments. There are a lot of really complicated pockets there, and there's also a lot of crossing of city and county lines, which makes evacuation and who is responsible for it particularly tricky. And you really don't want to be figuring that out in the middle of the wildfire. You want to figure that out before the wildfire.
Yeah, and I know that there are a lot of non-native plant incursion in Allen Rock Park, for example. They've talked about trying to thin that out and cut that back to try to, because that's a really susceptible area.
Yep.
And then just about water, obviously I've been we've had the conversations all in on water purification. In my thinking, the best place where we can invest our funding going forward is in purification, to close that loop, reuse more of our water, and not have to rely on these heavy rain winters for our water. I think we have a potential to do great work in collaboration with the other agencies, whether it's SFPUC or Valley Water, or both, probably. I had a conversation with SFPUC folks about, if we build this water purification here, what's the best use of that, right? I mean, if we build it, would it be best just to keep it for ourselves and recirculate the water in our own system, or to send it off to SFPUC so it can be redistributed? So there's a lot of conversations to have about what our goals will be. I am looking forward to my trip next week to learn from the experts in Israel about how they do water, because they've really mastered it living in a desert. And then lastly, following up on the question about water recycling, now that we're embarking on the next round of North San Jose development, I think it's good. It would be a great opportunity for us to kind of think in parallel about building out that infrastructure there, so we may be able to put in place some city policies to require developments to use water in a certain way. But we have to have the infrastructure first before we can do that. And since so much development's coming, I'd love to be able to say to a developer, you got this water recycling line, you're going to have to use the recycled water in the appropriate places in your development as you move forward. Any thoughts about that?
In our North Bay service area, our Muni water system is the retailer. And so we have to balance ratepayer costs with building infrastructure. So we do look at how we might borrow money and sort of spread out the cost of that infrastructure. We are keen on expanding the use of purple pipe where it makes sense, and you'll see that like in the Microsoft project in other areas where they're high water users. The high water users make the most sense for us, whether that's server farms or outdoor irrigation, more so than in a building, because in a building there are requirements for staff certifications and additional maintenance and redundant piping, et cetera. But we are very much in alignment with the desire to use as much of our effluent as possible, particularly in North San Jose, because we are the water retailer there. So we do have a lot more influence.
Great, thank you. And the good news is that Microsoft tells me that they, in their 2 facilities they're going to build in San Jose, are planning to do air cool and not water cool. So it may not even be an issue, although they would use water for backup in really hot days. And in Santa Clara, the city, they now have an ordinance that those server farms have to have a closed loop water where they're using the heat from the water and recirculating the water. So we should be thinking about our ordinances going forward. All right, back to colleagues. Councilmember Foley.
Thank you for the report. I just want to focus on natural disasters as it relates to earthquakes, and particularly mindful of the real devastating earthquake we just saw in Turkey, and in relation to the soft story apartments and multifamily. What's our status on those?
Currently, we have a contractor on under work looking and evaluating the facilities, the structures. We're identifying that there are perhaps more than we originally identified. And with that effort, they will come up with some alternate designs and a policy and ordinance, model ordinance that we should be presenting in the June or August timeframe. And we're also looking at alternative funding systems to assist with the operation and installation of these potential fixes.
Yeah, and we should have the first cut at the more comprehensive survey internally to guide us by the end of March, if not sooner. And that will help us understand as we bring our recommended ordinance to you for discussion, consideration, and hopefully ultimate adoption in some form, what the focus would be, because we'll need to do some prioritization. We do feel at this point it would need to be a mandatory ordinance in order to be able to be effective, is our inclination, but we want to do some more analysis before we come back with a formal recommendation based on the actual data, the understanding, and the analysis of the existing ordinances in California to try to kind of harvest the best practices.
It is currently being funded by a FEMA mitigation grant, and once we get to that ordinance component, then there's a second part to the grant as well for the implementation as well.
So through the FEMA grant, thank you for that, is it likely that we would find some grant assistance for the property owners to help them?
That's part of the process.
Make their soft story earthquake retrofitted?
Yes, but I would really damp down expectations on that in terms of the levels. A lot of what we're trying to do is create a process which is very efficient and in which we've identified or at least pointed toward how they can design the solutions at the most cost-effective way. Given the numbers of buildings that we're going to see, I cannot conceive of a way that we'd have enough grant funding to really go around in a meaningful way. So I just want to. Most of that grant funding will be focused on making the process as efficient as possible and as low cost in terms of our staff involvement in order to be able to have the maximum benefit for the most property owners.
Thank you. And do we have an idea of how many units we're talking about, and more importantly, how many residents?
Not yet. We know it's significant. Some early ballpark estimates that were done by San Jose State over a decade ago were around perhaps as many as 1,100 soft story buildings. And again, these soft story buildings are in San Jose can vary from just a duplex to multifamily, and it's really the multifamily ones that we're most concerned about for obvious reasons. They tend to be among the more affordable places to live, and therefore people with very limited means and very much at risk to begin with, and add an earthquake on top of that. So very, very high level of concern. We'll have more of that information and specificity as the survey is completed, and we'll bring back that kind of hazard lens to you as we discuss the policy and make any recommendations.
Okay, thank you. I know we're looking at housing. Are we also looking at soft story office buildings?
Yeah, at this point, we're looking at all soft story structures, and then we'll again come back with sort of if there is a prioritization between the two different uses, but we're trying to get a sense of all of the buildings in San Jose that are soft story.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Candelas.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank staff for the report. I think it's important that we're being proactive in exploring resilient opportunities for us as a city to protect against whether it's natural disasters or even climate change. That, you know, it's a slow disaster, it's creeping on us, right? And so with regards to our creating water supply opportunities, maybe what does that look like with either DPR, IPR, and that LOI we signed with Valley Water? Maybe just a quick high level on it.
We're working all those angles. I mean, the reality is DPR regulations are going to be affirmed in the next year or two, and so there's really little value in building a pipe to South San Jose, right? So I think everyone's really looking at DPR as the path that makes sense. There is clearly some public hesitation on that, but I think together we can all get there. So I think there will be a project in San Jose. It's just a matter of when. And as you know, Valley Water's working the Palo Alto facility first, and you know they're learning a lot together. And I think that's going to enable us to move even faster.
Awesome. Thank you. That was just a question I had coming from you know, a short stint at Valley Water. I appreciated the opportunity to to hear from you on that, and I think not just on a you know District 8 level. Where we do have a good amount of recycled water, but more broadly as a city, where you know we are ebb and flowing with our water. I mean, we have rain outside, but you know we don't know a year, 2 years from now. So thank you, Karen.
Yeah, the real roadblock right now is brine disposal.
Oh yeah.
So once we figure that out, which we will, then we're off and running.
There's no doubt in my mind, Karen.
All right, I think that's it for comments, so we move to vote.
Candelas.
Aye.
Ortiz.
Aye.
Foley. Davis.
Yes.
And Cohen.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to our final item, our clean energy update. I don't see Lori, but I think others from the team are here. Oh, Zach, you're going to lead the discussion?
Good afternoon, Zach Strike, Assistant Director of the Community Energy Department. Lori is traveling today. I'm joined here by Kate Ziemba, Senior Environmental Program Manager, and Marco Santiago, our Power Resources Specialist in the programs team. We're going to today and some brief discussions of what might come in the longer term. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate.
Thank you and good afternoon. The San Jose Clean Energy Programs Roadmap charts our course for implementing customer programs. It was developed through a 2-year stakeholder engagement process that included workshops, surveys, and focus groups in Spanish and Vietnamese. In March 21, Council accepted the program's roadmap, and we now provide annual updates each spring to the Transportation and Environment Committee. It is meant to be a living document, evolving according to customer needs, funding sources, and city priorities. San Jose Clean Energy's programs focus on 6 areas, and these areas have been chosen based off other CCA programs, their connections to Climate Smart, and our program guiding principles. Oops. In fall 2021, San Jose became the largest U.S. city to adopt a carbon neutral by 2030 goal. And San Jose Clean Energy plays an important part by providing a carbon-free electricity supply to the city. But this will only go so far. We need to electrify transportation and buildings to achieve the goal. And SJCE programs can provide incentives to residents and businesses to electrify. San Jose Clean Energy is focused on leveraging external funding to develop programs while we're building an operating reserve to cushion against volatility in the power markets and regulatory changes. We're on track to fully build the operating reserve by the end of 2023, so we expect to fund more programs with operational surpluses starting in 2024. And we'll now provide an update on our current programs. We are implementing the 6 programs listed here, and their lifetime budgets total $38.5 million, 80% of which comes from external funding sources. And we'll go into detail on each of these. But first, want to share the annual impacts of some of our current programs that we could quantify. Each year, the programs are saving 5 million kilowatt hours of electricity, more than 700 metric tons of CO2, and nearly 7 million off customer bills. So the first program we'll start with is called Cali VIP, which stands for the California Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. It is a partnership with the California Energy Commission to provide $14 million in rebates to install level 2 and direct current fast chargers at multifamily housing, workplaces, and public places. It launched in late 2020, and we expect the chargers to continue to be installed through 2025. About 35% of the funding will go towards chargers located in communities that the state defines as low income or disadvantaged. And so far, 100 level 2 and 11 fast chargers are operational. The map on the right shows that San Jose has many census tracts that are charging deserts. They have little to no public charging infrastructure. And the lighter the census tract, the higher the equity score assigned by the San Jose Equity Atlas, which was developed by the Office of Racial Equity. And a higher equity score indicates higher concentrations of low-income households and communities of color. In November, Council approved San Jose Clean Energy's Fast Charging Hubs pilot project, which aims to install more charging infrastructure in charging deserts and to increase EV adoption. The pilot will result in 1 to 3 fast charging hubs being installed at city-owned sites in neighborhoods lacking charging infrastructure. The city will enter into pay-for-performance tolling agreements with 1 or more developers who will own, operate, and maintain the hubs. And we believe this contracting structure will result in higher reliability. Importantly, San Jose Clean Energy will set retail pricing with the goal of making charging affordable for residents of the surrounding neighborhoods and incentivizing middle-of-the-day charging. I'll now turn it over to Marcos.
Thank you, Kate. Good afternoon, committee members and members of the public. My name is Marco Santiago, and I'm excited to tell you more about our current program, starting with this one, Solar Access. This was a program that's funded by the state, and it was launched in November 2021. Today, this program provides over 800 households in communities most impacted by economic, health, and environmental burdens with a much-needed 20% discount on their electricity bill, as well as 100% renewable energy, which ensures that they get to play a part in San Jose's energy transition. Any customer that lives in a disadvantaged community, as defined by the state of California, and is also enrolled in PG&E's CARE or Fair Rate Assistance Program is eligible to enroll. Right now, we consider the program fully subscribed, but we continue to process enrollments every month as current participants drop out. So anybody that is eligible should apply. Up next, we have energy efficiency, and we have 2 of these programs, one for San Jose residents and one for businesses. Both of these launched on September 2022 and are funded primarily through state program funds as well as ARP funds. A total budget of $5.6 million will allow the program to run through the end of 2024, with the goal of achieving 2,800 megawatt hours of annual energy savings. And in the short time since the program launched, residents have already claimed over 140 smart plugs, 115 smart thermostats, and 9 appliances. And these appliances, by the way, are provided at a 50 to 70% discount to these customers. An expansion of our offerings in 2023 will only accelerate the rate of participation. And businesses are also jumping on this opportunity. The San Jose Energy Efficient Business Program provides 80 to 90% rebates on HVAC, refrigeration, and water heating components. And we've already served 20 businesses, and there are 44 other applicants going through the process now, including some school facilities. And finally, we have SJ Cares, which is a rate discount that's automatically provided to 75,000 San Jose Clean Energy customers on PG&E's Care and Fairer rate assistance programs. We increased the discount from 5% in 2022 to 10% in 2023, which means that customers on this program now save $15 to $20 a month on their SJCE bill. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Kate to talk about our near-term program recommendations.
In calendar years 2023 and 2024, we recommend pursuing 14 programs and pilots that continue to leverage external funding and allow us to test program delivery models. 6 of the 14 programs fall under vehicle electrification, since transportation accounts for more than half of San Jose's greenhouse gas emissions. And here, San Jose Clean Energy is focused on 2 issues: managing the additional electrical demand from charging as more customers go electric, with the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and improving resiliency. The graph on the right shows that the cleanest time for customers to charge is in the middle of the day when the grid is flush with solar, and that's represented by the yellow bars. The second is to work with other city departments like the Department of Transportation to help ensure equitable EV adoption and access to charging infrastructure. San Jose has one of the highest rates of EV adoption in the nation. About 30% of new vehicles purchased since spring 2022 have been electric. And we looked at years' worth of bills for our residential EV customers and found that most residential charging occurs overnight, represented by the blue line in the graph. And you'll notice a spike at charging at 1 a.m. We want to get ahead of costly overnight spikes and shift as much charging as possible to the middle of the day to align with solar. This will lower San Jose Clean Energy's procurement costs and, in turn, customer rates. We surveyed our EV customers and found opportunities for shifting charging. So first, nearly 80% of the survey respondents work from home at least one or all days of the week. 80% of charging occurs at home, and nearly half of respondents said their workplace has chargers. On our shared goal of ensuring equitable adoption of EVs, the good news is that low-income households can stack incentives to drastically bring down the price of an EV. Incentives include federal tax credits for new and used EVs, a state rebate for new EVs, a local incentive for new and used EVs from Clean Cars for All that will increase to $12,000 later this year, and a new rebate from PG&E for used EVs. And so the 6 vehicle electrification programs we recommend pursuing over the near term are: first, a telematics-based managed charging program where we automatically shift charging for 500 residential participants with EVs from peak times and overnight to daytime, about 10 to 12 times per month and during grid emergencies. This is an opportunity to study whether a scaled-up program can cost-effectively shift charging load and lower our procurement costs. We also recommend pursuing an EV education pilot where we host test drive events, financial education workshops, and one-on-one assistance navigating the incentives and rebates to neighborhoods with low EV adoption in partnership with 3 to 5 community-based organizations. We also aim to develop an online EV educational tool for residents to compare lifetime costs and emissions of EVs with gas-powered cars, taking into account a tailored list of incentives. And both the last two educational programs would be carried out in multiple languages. We also recommend pursuing a $5 million grant from the CPUC to install EV charging infrastructure in low-income communities. And we recognize the value rates play in driving when customers charge. We're currently constrained in changing our residential EV rates to incentivize middle-of-the-day charging, but we're working with PG&E to identify paths forward. But we are able to adjust commercial charging rates by lowering the rates during their super off-peak middle-of-the-day times, and recommend exploring that. And then finally, we propose to offer an e-bike rebate program for our low-income CARE and FARA customers. Now on to building electrification. Building electrification is another important program area, and it involves replacing natural gas uses in buildings with electric ones, such as heat pumps for space and water heating and cooling. And electric appliances are more efficient, safer, healthier, and less expensive to operate. We have been coordinating on building electrification with the Environmental Services Department and Climate Smart team to recommend programs that are consistent with the city's building electrification framework. And our recommended programs build off and promote 4 new federal and state incentive programs for incentive appliances. We recommend building new educational web pages on electric appliances. That includes average project costs, incentives, permitting requirements, testimonials from San Jose residents who have installed the appliances, and a bill impact calculator. We also recommend developing a heat pump water heater incentive program that leverages $5 million in CPUC funding to fund all or almost all of the installation project costs for 500 low-income customers, including panel upgrades if needed. And we're partnering with ESD on an educational campaign focused on the health impacts of gas and the benefits of electric cooking, featuring social media videos with scientists, chefs, and local micro-influencers. And then finally, to help contractors become more familiar with heat pumps, we recommend leveraging Silicon Valley Clean Energy's online contractor training and paying participants up to $5,000 to take what they learned and apply it by funding a heat pump installation in their home or business. Now I'll turn it over to Marcos again.
Here we are. So moving on to demand response. If you're not familiar with demand response programs, they essentially compensate residents and businesses for reducing their energy use during energy-saving events, which can include grid emergencies when electricity demand is expected to be greater than what we have available. Sorry. These programs are a cost-effective way to balance supply and demand, while also improving grid resiliency and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And we can break these down into 3 main categories, as you can see on the slides. Well, the first is behavioral, which achieves reductions by encouraging residents and businesses to manually power down during peak hours. The second is automated, which sends wireless signals to smart-enabled devices, having them throttle down automatically. And the last is load shaping, which is similar to automated DR, but on a larger scale. So we're talking about sending signals to building management systems or discharging large batteries onto the grid. And as I mentioned, demand response is a cost-effective way of meeting demand and improving resiliency, so we're recommending implementing demand response in 4 phases. The first phase would start this year in summer and would be targeted at the largest commercial electricity consumers in San Jose. Customers would receive an incentive credit based on the amount of energy they're able to save during events. And this would be a value not just to them, but also to San Jose Clean Energy, as it would reduce procurement costs and be an opportunity to understand how customers respond to price signals. We would follow this up with a full-scale behavioral-based residential and commercial program in the summer of 2024 and incorporate any lessons learned from this year. And then automated demand response and load shaping would follow in later phases. Moving on to program-specific rates, we're exploring 2 programs that would benefit San Jose's lowest income residents, and we would bring these back to council for consideration in the near term. The first would be an expansion of our SJ Cares program that we mentioned in the earlier slides. And even though we're already serving 75,000 households with this program, we know there are more families that are in need of bill assistance, and so we're working with city departments and county public assistance agencies to identify customer groups that receive public assistance of other types so that we can expand this benefit to them as well. The second is an emergency bill assistance program that would provide funds for overdue bill payment to households at risk of falling into homelessness. And then finally, we have resiliency. So we're currently funding a program manager position within the Public Works Department to add microgrids to critical facilities, as you heard earlier in this meeting. And so we hope that by leveraging in-house expertise, we can provide assistance to Public Works and set up a power purchase agreement or feed-in tariff that would facilitate and expand the deployment of microgrids to as many critical facilities as possible in a short amount of time. Oh, that was 2 of them, sorry. And then just in terms of long-term programs, we're recommending 10 long-term programs to be pursued in 2025 and beyond. These programs would build off current and near-term programs, and we would incorporate any lessons learned from those programs. And with that, we'll take any questions.
I'll just add 4 quick points before I turn it back over. As you can see from the staff presentation, this is kind of a year of test and learn on a lot of interesting items. I want to make sure that we nail it before we scale it, as we used to say in the innovation team. Second is that we are very much focused on scaling the large clean energy team in parallel to this. There's an awful lot of effort in the department level focused on doing that work, which will drive the funding for the programs. And so to that end, we're going to be coming back with the larger program recommendations when we've done 2 things. One, we have the full $180 million that you've directed us to keep in reserve, which gives us 180 days of operating reserve. So we wouldn't be bringing back large spending recommendations until after we have that reserve built up. And secondly, we'll be in parallel developing a set of parallel recommendations around what I would call internal programs that we may be recommending, probably largely around critical infrastructure as it relates to electrification, things like the microgrids for resilience that you saw earlier today, or the fact that we have approximately 2,800 rolling stock vehicles that we need to convert to electric vehicles. And so in addition to the outward-facing customer programs that you see today, the team will be developing internal recommendations to support our core services and critical infrastructure. So we anticipate that will be obviously not in this year's budget cycle, but we anticipate by next year's budget cycle, we will meet those preconditions and come back to you with a recommendation for scaling both this program set that you see before you based on the lessons learned, as well as some recommendations for internal programs. So with that as a little bit of context and timing, we're happy to take any questions as long as the hard one goes to the staff.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We're going to start with public comment.
Blair Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. You had a community energy agenda item, I think, on last week's agenda that I hope, I haven't looked into it yet. I hope it can relate to this item, what you talked about here today. And just a reminder that community energy can be a really good way to kind of navigate what we should be expecting of ourselves and what to expect of our future in the next year and the next few years. What will our weather patterns be like? What will be the electricity needs in navigating those kind of questions? And for that to be an open process, I hope you guys can make good efforts to be clear for ourselves as a community what to really expect in the coming year and the next few years. Hopefully the forecast can be good. It's just a matter, I think community energy can have a real good purpose to make that clear and understandable for us in our choices we have to make in the coming years. Good luck how we do that, and as always, to do that in our positive, good terms, so we don't have to rely on the concepts of disaster capitalism. It's really important. So thanks for your help, and good luck on our good efforts this year. Thanks.
Back to the committee.
All right, Councilmember Davis.
Thank you. I want to thank you so much for your report and the programs and the plans that you have. I appreciate the way you laid it out and the plans for helping folks with electrification in households. I just have one request. The focus on low income and multifamily to start out with is very much appropriate. Please remember the middle income folks who maybe scraped and were able to afford an older home and are going to be stuck with large purchases, and the electrification will often require, and I know because I live in one of these older homes, will require an upgrade to the panel in addition to a change of the large appliances. And so even the first big one going out, whether it's the water heater or the furnace or the dryer, is going to require a panel upgrade and a lot of wiring upgrades that, unless you're getting a nice tax refund, the average middle income household is not going to be able to afford that, and it's going to be paying it off on a credit card for many, many years. So there is a need there, and it's a pretty big one. So I just want to put that out there, that middle income households cannot be forgotten in these programs. And then the other one is just a question on slide 11, the vehicle electrification. You had a cool map, very small, and even in the memo, it's not a clickable map. So if you guys could send us the link to that so that we could click and zoom and figure out exactly where I couldn't see the freeways to give me my rough boundaries for my own district, and that would be really helpful. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Just want to thank you for the very thorough report. I'm really proud of the work that Clean Energy is doing in San Jose. I think we're doing a great job and really a lot of initiatives. And I'm excited that we're going to hit our fully funded reserve this year so we can start investing in community benefit as we electrify and decarbonize. And then, as Councilmember Davis mentioned, the work that I think we're going to be doing going forward with the contractor we signed with last year, to sort of do that inventory of what homes and businesses need electrical upgrades in order to be ready, and how we're going to be ahead of the curve. If in the report it was mentioned that appliances, or maybe it was in your presentation too, that appliances, Bay Area Air Quality Management District is going to basically phase out the availability of electrical furnaces and air conditioning units by 2027, 2029. So we're coming close, 4 years. We got to figure out how houses will be ready and how we can help fund them to be ready. So we need to be ready, prepared. And then just a couple questions about EV and EV charging, or maybe comments. We have to change the narrative, I think, on EV costs. We continue to allow people to say that EVs are unaffordable, that average people can't have EVs, when it really isn't true. I mean, you gave an example of a low-cost EV, but I was at the auto show a couple weeks ago, and there are a range of EVs in the same price range as vehicles that many people are buying that are equally or more expensive. And there are EVs in the $20,000 to $25,000 range, and we're not countering the narrative that EVs are still unaffordable. And I just want to figure out how we can do that to try to encourage people and explain, no, there are affordable EVs, they're good vehicles, and they're cheaper than once you get them to operate. So you're saving money all around by buying an EV, and you're doing the right thing. I know there's some houses that need some upgrade, maybe a new circuit on the panel, but I'll tell you, when I bought my EV, I had an electrician come and it was like $600 to install. I mean, that's money for people, obviously. I'm not belittling that, but people are talking about thousands of dollars for an EV charging infrastructure at their home. It really isn't. putting in a 230 plug in many homes is a very inexpensive endeavor. So I just want us to make sure that we're figuring out how we're going to do some messaging around this topic going forward. But your comment about people having chargers at their workplace, I will say there's a charger at my workplace, which is this building. The problem is, and I think someone asked about this before, why are we still charging session fees? Because I'm not gonna charge here as long as I'm gonna have to pay an extra $2 or $3 when I can go home and charge at home. So if we really want to encourage use, we ought to be figuring out how to make it useful and reasonable so people don't have extra fees tacked onto it. So just another suggestion. I was excited last week, Santa Cruz did a ribbon cutting for their first EV garbage truck. I know this is a different issue. It's not city infrastructure, but they now have an EV garbage truck in the fleet there. Carrie's not here anymore for us to ask about how we might get there, but we have to work with our outside contractors as well on their fleets and not just our own city fleets. And then the last thing I was going to mention is while we're trying to convert people to electrical infrastructure, I'm still getting ads in the mail, those weekly ads from contractors all trying to get your business, and they all talk about upgrading new appliances, helping with appliances, and they always have pictures of gas appliances on their flyers. They're acting as if there's no change coming. There's no companies out there actively advertising and saying, hey, convert to the better technology, convert to the cleaner technology, here's the financing deals in place. There's a lot of tax incentives for it. And so while we're trying to change people's mindset, the businesses doing business in San Jose are acting as if we're still business as usual. And I'm just wondering if we might be able to work with some of those folks to change that as well. So those are just my comments, and I saw some people taking notes, so I don't need to ask any questions on that. Councilmember Candelas.
Thank you. I appreciate the report from staff. I think it's especially important on the equity lens and application of that. Just to comment, I'm sure we all feel the same way, but the current infrastructure of charging station makes it so even if somebody, let's say in Meadow Fair or somewhere in my district, wants to get a very, very low cost EV option, without having an at-home or nearby charging station, it makes it very, very difficult to do that, especially if it's multifamily housing. And so let's think, with regards to where we roll out our programming, make sure we actually have that infrastructure. So they go hand in hand. Those are just the only comments. Thank you for the update, and I'm glad to see we're moving in that direction. I think it's good for our community and good for the planet.
And council member, to that point, I think it's March 28th that you'll see an item on the update of what we call our REACH code as it relates to electric vehicles in multifamily housing, which will be before you for your consideration on new regulations for new multifamily housing as it relates to this. So it's new, so it's only a partial solve, but it will be at least a piece of the puzzle. They'll come before you in a couple of weeks.
I don't know we had a motion yet on this one.
Move to accept report.
Second.
All right, great. Let's move to a vote.
Candelas,
Aye.
Ortiz,
Aye.
Foley,
Aye.
Davis,
Yes.
and Cohen.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, then we're on to open forum.
Blair Beekman?
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Councilperson Cohen very nicely mentioned at last week's council meeting the needs of, we need to be aware of, in trying to prepare for good practices in the coming year, the need of emergency preparedness planning and that smart streetlight things are in order. And I just wanted to thank him for those words. I thought it was pretty smart of him to take that approach, and hope that we are considering those things. I think you had an item about emergency preparedness today that I tried to mention. I hope things go well with that subject. And I think we made really good beginning steps in the previous administration towards emergency preparedness that are second to none in the Bay Area, and really can be good examples of just bringing the community together to prepare. And good luck in keeping up that good work and good efforts, and that we can talk to each other and be clear what really to expect in the coming year. And with that, I think we can have a good forecast, I'm hoping. I also wanted to mention, I think there was a situation about, or just a polite nod to, as one of the new council persons has been on the, was on the, previously on the Measure T commission, just a hello to them and a reminder that I hope, you know, the public will want to get involved in more of what they do overall. I think they provide a good service for ourselves that I hope you'll be interested in. And it's a good commission process. And from the committee meetings last week, the council meetings on you know, special study sessions things, a reminder from Councilperson Cohen's words that good luck in real accountability practices, how we continue can think of those good things. Thanks.
Back to the committee.
All right, thank you. We are adjourned.